Well, welcome everyone. My name is Olivia Ledee. I'm the acting federal director of the Midwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. Really happy to be here, and I want to say happy anniversary. So this is the the 1 year mark of us being a full partnership with the University of Minnesota hosts and the consortium of partners. So really excited. It's been a long time to get here, and we're now seeing sort of all of the fruit dropping from the trees. And so very excited. Looking forward to our seminar today with Indiana University, as well as the future ones to come. So don't forget to register. This is a great opportunity to build community, build capacity, engage, and share. So with that, I will turn it over to Jess.
You want to give a quick overview of what?
Oh, I didn't realize we were. Oh, sure.
Just real quick.
Yeah. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Climate Adaptation Science Center and in the Midwest Climate Adaptation Science Center, so Congress appropriated funding in fiscal year 20 for us to create a center reflecting the needs of the Midwest region that are unique. So this is a USGS partnership with NGOs and universities. And so from a successful call proposal in response to a solicitation that we sent out, we have a cooperative agreement with University of Minnesota and a consortium of 8 other partners in the region, really to be responsive to the science needs that are stated by Department of Interior, states, tribal agencies in the region, to really deliver climate impact and adaptation science to inform future conservation. So.
Thanks, Olivia. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No problem.
I am Jess Delfiaco. I'm the communications manager for the Midwest CASC. And before we get started with our excellent presentation and some project announcements, I wanted to just share a couple recent big news items. As Olivia said, we are at our 1st year anniversary, so there's lots of things that have been happening, but I wanted to highlight that we had our first annual gathering at the end of August at UW-Madison. It was great to see lots of faces in person for many people for the very first time. And at that time, we also announced our new look. You see we have a logo, we've got new colors, new slides. You'll start seeing that show up on all the new platforms that we have, like our social media and our email newsletter and all that. So very exciting. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kristen to share some project announcements. Oh, and also mention, these are our upcoming seminars. You can click that link, go to that link there if you want to sign up for reminders and invites to those. All right, Kristen, it's over to you.
Thank you, Jess. And welcome everybody. As Olivia said, happy anniversary. I'm really excited to be announcing our university awarded projects. And so these are the projects that are going through our University of Minnesota host to other university PIs in our consortium. And so it's a slightly different process than the USGS ones. So we're very proud of ourselves for getting this money out the door. We had the previous monthly seminar with USGS PIs and their slides. We're just gonna announce those here with their slides and then have another maybe follow-up opportunity to meet with them. But I do expect that some of them may be on this call today. So I want to invite everybody to drop questions in the chat if you see something interesting, just to let them know that you would maybe want to follow up and have conversation. And for those PIs, if they're here, to also just say hi in the chat, or maybe even just pop your camera on and wave. But let's go ahead, Jess. There's 4 of them I want to announce. First one is with Dr. Daniel Weimar, the combined effects of seasonal climate and extreme precipitation on flood hazard in the Midwest. And so this problem is, this proposal is looking at the problem of using prior climate and landscape conditions that interact with heavy precipitation events to create intense flooding. And this is sort of an interaction that there's a need for more data in order to understand and to prioritize what green infrastructure will be useful for managing those incidents. As you can see here, the partner for this project is Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, and we look forward to seeing Dan's work, at the future monthly seminar. So the next one, sorry. Sarah Fitzpatrick is our next PI, leveraging genomic data to increase adaptive potential and inform management action in the endangered Mitchell-Satyr butterfly under climate change. This is a project looking at small isolated populations of Mitchell-Satyr, understanding the heat tolerance of those populations in order to relate that to their response to future climate. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a partner on this, as well as Michigan Natural Features Inventory and the Mitchell-Satyr Working Group, which is through Fish and Wildlife Service, but they are working on strategies for reintroduction. And so understanding the genomic background for these different populations could help direct those assisted gene flow experiments and strategies for the species. So the next one, Dr. Alexis Grine at the University of Minnesota, assessing the impacts of, emerald ash borer moth and adaptive management on habitat quality for at-risk wildlife in black ash forests. So EAB is, I guess, a short term that a lot of us may be familiar with, but I want to make sure I try to spell it out. And so this is looking at larger spatial resolution, so ecosystem scale experiments on what these EAB mortality events are doing, not only to the forest habitat, but also to the wildlife that are there, those that are the birds, the small mammals, in order to be able to inform proactive and other management strategies, those that are reacting, but especially to get ahead of it and incorporate those climate data into those understanding. As you can see, the partners here, USDA, Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, 1854 Treaty Authority, and the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. And finally, last but not least, we have Dr. Diana Carwan, also at University of Minnesota, identifying thermal refugia for brook trout climate adaptation in cold water streams. And this project is going to be looking at a novel approach to identifying these thermal refugia using drone techniques to identify where cold water influxes could be existing or predicted in order to be able to, better support brook trout as they adjust to climate change. Sorry, I got distracted by the mouse moving around. I don't know if that was me or Jess. So partners for this one are Colorado State University, Fish and Wildlife Service, White River Watershed Collaborative, and and that's it. So welcome to Daniel, Sarah, Diana, and Alexis. We're excited for you guys and your work, and please reach out to them if you have questions or want to hear more about the upcoming projects. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you, Kristen. So we're going to move on to our main presentation today. And I think Gabe is going to share slides. Gabe, are you able to do that?
Let's give it a shot.
Stop sharing on my end here.
Is that looking about right?
I think so.
Okay. Not a great voice of confidence, but I'll go with it. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a thrill to be here on the sort of anniversary of the MCASC. Advance apologies if either my voice or my brain gives out. I managed to get COVID over the weekend, so I'll be doing the best I can. But fortunately, I'm only infecting my laptop right now, so I think we're pretty good. So I wanted to talk about some of the sort of the deeper work that the Environmental Resilience Institute does at Indiana University, and some of it is slightly tangential to the major goals of the MCASC. But nevertheless, I think it's important to think about how to engage communities, both diverse communities and vulnerable ones, as well as those with agency, to make a real difference and to confront climate change impacts. So it probably comes as no huge surprise to any of us, because we're all scientists, that it's getting really hot. And the last 7 years have been the hottest years on record. It's also kind of clear to most of us is that the words and summits alone won't fix this warming problem. Here's the other version of warming stripes. I love the logo version as well. So we've been talking about this for a long time. It's not just theoretically talking about it for a long time. In my lifespan, we've been talking about it for a long time, and nothing much has happened in terms of bending down that curve substantially. I'm not being nihilistic here. It certainly is. There's huge pushes in renewables and other ways to develop emission control, as well as historic legislation on climate with the Infrastructure Reduction Act, Inflation Reduction Act. But nevertheless, this means that we're leaving a lot of communities, a lot of wildlife, a lot of natural systems in a pretty precarious state during the transition. And so that is at least part of what the ERI does, and to frame this, what I mean by precarious state, well, it can be painted on our climate trajectories. And this is the climate trajectory for Indiana, the winter ones in blue, the summer ones in red. And the key thing I think to note on some of these projections is that it's going to substantially change our current landscape management, agricultural management, wildlife capacities, as well as some of the human health impacts that I'll talk about in a little bit. We, along with a lot of the upper Midwest, benefit from free summer rainfall to water our grain crops, our corn and soybeans. The free summer rainfall is seeming less and less sure nowadays, and that will require some kind of significant adaptation. And I'm not just talking about for agricultural resources, I'm talking about for natural resources as well as human. The extreme heat is actually going to be a pretty substantial burden for a lot of systems, again, for ecosystems as well as for humans. These are some of our projections for the heat impacts in Indiana. You can sort of scale it to your favorite state, and it'll be around the same stats in this whole part of the Midwest. And this provides some significant adaptation challenges. We've heard about the very kudos on the Brook trout, cold brook, or whatever that is, an organism. I'm mainly a geologist, but an organism that's suffering from the end of colder waterways. I'm also, by the way, Jess or whoever, I'm admitting people as they're in the waiting room. I hope that's okay, because I don't know who else is supposed to do that. One of the ways that this heating really intersects with our urban landscape, and we are an urbanized society increasingly, is that it causes very significant heat island effects, which are also equivalent to air quality effects in a sense. And I use this cartoon not to validate some scientific fact. It's just that concrete and roofs and asphalt heat up a lot during the day, and they give off the heat during the night, so they never really cool down as much as natural spaces. So we've designed our cities to be about the worst possible environment to manage on in a warming planet. It doesn't have to be that way, as this cartoon shows. There's this pocket below a park, an urban park. Well, we know that urban greening and urban green infrastructure has substantial co-benefits, not just for wildlife, but also for human health. And I'm going to touch on this again with one of the tools that the ERI offers in a moment. But there's this tendency to think, well, we have to live with the design we've got. Well, we actually design cities so we can design them however we want, in a sense. And so we can design them to be more equitable, cleaner, healthier, and more wildlife-rich places. Some of our work then that we do at the ERI focuses in exactly on what are some of these, what's the science behind some of these extreme events. So not only have we offered a number of downscaled climate model packages over the last couple of years, but we're also now starting to hone in on what is the sort of the micro environmental environment for a lot of our cities and communities. What in this case, we're looking at air quality. What is the disparity of air quality? Or you can just you can add in temperature if you want onto this. What's the signature of air quality in cities? Where is it better? Where is it worse? And how do you use that natural experiment of better or worse to then design a system, an urban system that maximizes the benefits, or in other words, that tries to get more green dots particularly around vulnerable communities or high population communities. The reason why this is important, why I kind of harp on this, is that our cities are painted with terrible racial policies, past racial policies, such that this is the red line map of Indianapolis. You can still see the exact same infrastructure disparities that were built into the city of Indianapolis and built by racist building practices and development and lending practices mainly. You can still see that on the air quality distribution, right? Red line communities still have worse air, they're hotter, and generally worse environments than the non-red line communities. So what we're trying to do with a lot of our work is to adjust the way we monitor cities so that we are monitoring where the population, making sure to monitor adequately where the populations are most vulnerable and where perhaps there can be wildlife resources for the city and some of those communities. We just received an NSF civic planning grant to extend this work. This is just a 6-month grant that we can go in for another bigger chunk. But our main focus here is going to be on urban greening and its benefits and co-benefits to the environment and temperature and air quality and potentially for wildlife robustness. The other big factor, and I don't, again, preaching to the Midwestern choir, I don't necessarily need to preach this a whole lot more, but our biggest impact, along with the extreme heat in Indiana, has been extreme precipitation. Our overall precipitation has gone up. The extreme precipitation has gone up substantially. The reason why this is important is that we're not yet gaining the lessons we should learn from this is not climate modeling. This is just measurement with the rain gauges, right? We are not yet learning that, okay, if we built something to 2000 standards, let's say, for extreme precipitation, we've already blown away our metric for that, right? In 20 years, it's gone up about 15% from the year 2000. The reason this is critical is that that's exactly the baseline that the city of Indianapolis and the EPA came up with for their consent decree to upgrade our stormwater infrastructure in the city. So they use, for convenience, the year 2000, and that's the size of the fixed capacity of stormwater infrastructure that we're currently building to the tune of $1.1 billion in the city of Indianapolis. And it has no added capacity, that's just fixed capacity, right? So it's already going to fail. Once it's hooked up in 2 years, it's already going to fail. Yes, it'll be better than nothing at all, no question, but it'll already fail. And this gets more stark that in the lifetime of that infrastructure, it's going to go up another 15% in terms of extreme precipitation. So this presents many unique challenges to how cities function. If they don't have augmented green infrastructure around the gray infrastructure, are they really resilient? We would argue that they're not. They're not resilient to climate change in the future, or even actually climate change now. This is just a famous picture of South Bend, Indiana. Jessica Hellman, at least, would be well aware of this place. It famously had, over the last decade, had a 500-year flood and a 1,000-year flood within 2 years of each other. And obviously, statistics don't work that way. It's just another notice, I think, put up to us that adjustments need to be made in a lot of these cities and towns. And in the city of South Bend or small city of Clarksville or Mankato, Minnesota, I don't know where Mankato is, but apparently it's a city in Minnesota. Do they have $1.1 billion to handle some of this stuff? No, probably not. So they need solutions, and they need solutions that work on the ground for their contexts and that are climate resilient. So I'm going to walk through a couple of those solutions. I'm going to start off with some kind of science-based work that we've been doing. This is not an exhaustive list, but it provides some snapshots at least, and then talk a little bit more about our toolkit and human resource aspects of climate resilience. So one of the aspects of increased stormwater discharge and an ancient sewer system is that our waterways in the city of Indianapolis, as well as in many other cities and towns throughout the US, are contaminated with fecal coliform bacteria. Right? They're patently unsafe to come in contact with many times out of the year. And even when the stormwater upgrade is complete, we fear that they now grow an endemic type of E. coli or fecal coliform that will mean that anytime there's even a smaller release that we'll be seeing the reemergence of E. coli blooms in waterways. So this presents one of the many challenges. And in this challenge, we've worked pretty strongly with community partners for the sampling of these systems, both directly in the streams, as well as in the upstream riparian zones, to try to understand what is that E. coli, what's driving it, how can we achieve our goals, water quality goals, when we know that our gray infrastructure project is already going to be failing us to some extent. And we're also trying to work at understanding the DNA of some of these E. coli. Are they just from us, human sewage? Is it from dogs and cats, or is it from wildlife? And that will help us understand how to target the driving factors in this case. And just how grim some of this is, we had a project with the Indianapolis Star, which is a newspaper here in Indianapolis, to monitor one stretch of the White River. This is the White River right here on the left, for a month, every 3 days or so, and measure its fecal coliform in the time where you'd expect it to be the worst. Well, in fact, it is the worst. And in the red line in the bottom is the safe contact level for that waterway. And you could see that that our values exceeded it for the entire month, which again, we want to use these waterways as assets, as community assets. We don't, and community education tools. We don't want to have signs up on these waterways saying, this is a pretty waterway, but don't walk in it, don't fish from it, don't come in contact with it. We want to be able to embrace these as resources, but until we clean them up, until we figure out the myriad of gray and green infrastructure solutions to, in this case, stormwater discharge, we'll frankly have significant challenges. Another bit of science that ERI has been working on a lot is expansion of vector-borne diseases. Some of them are mosquitoes. We have a significant increase in mosquito population, and it's largely driven by warmer winters and more ponding water. The challenge here is that the mosquito, the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which bears a lot of quote unquote tropical diseases like Zika, chikungunya, and dengue fever, it's now already endemic in the southern part of the state of Indiana. And our work predicts that by about 2035, it will sweep up through Indianapolis in the middle of the state until dominating the entire state by the year 2050. And the reason why this is an issue is not that we expect Zika to explode in Indiana anytime soon, but anytime you have a host, then if you happen to have somebody who has that disease who travel from abroad or even from in the country and gets bitten, then that becomes a possible vector for the disease. Our other work has to do with a vector shield that has to do with ticks and Lyme disease. Lyme disease is expanding throughout the Midwest. I don't think I need to tell any of my Minnesota brethren that. It's not just because of better diagnosis, although part of that is true. It's also because of the expansion of the tick disease, as well as expansion of their host, the deer. But we're trying to understand where are the biggest risks for Lyme disease and how you can control some of that. And finally, I think Ellen is on the call. Her amazing colleague, Alex John, has been working, and Ellen been working on examining the lifestyle of a lot of birds and understanding how climate change can impact their role as a disease vector. I've been also increasingly working on them on another non-climate related issue: is can we use robins to as barometers for urban soil contamination? And I'm happy to chat about that at some point with you guys. So on to some of the solution space that we've been working on. Our mission, this is the ERI house. Anyone who's coming to IU is welcome to join us. Is we're partnering with communities to implement feasible, equitable, and research-informed solutions around the state of Indiana and abroad. And so I'm going to show you what I mean. That's a lot of fancy words, but I'm going to show you what I mean. I gave you just a very quick brush on the science. I want to talk now about more the human capacity and the toolkits that we're deploying at ERI. And if I were to frame up what we do well in terms of resources for community engagement, it's these packages. So and I'm going to explain that Indiana Resilience Cohort's no longer called that, but it's still going even stronger. There is Environmental Resilience Institute Toolkit. There's educational resources, as well as a Hoosier Resilience Index. So these are a bunch of toolkits and resources that we can engage communities with in finding solutions for them, equitable and economic solutions for them. So let me get to this Climate Fellows. We actually rebranded this. This is the McKinney Climate Fellows program, probably one of our most successful programs working with communities and businesses. In this program, we have a cohort of about 40 students. They're upper level undergraduate and graduate students from all of the IU system, where it's a competitive application process. But once in, we place them with an organization that has identified a need, that they want somebody. The organization has to have a little skin in the game. They pay a little bit, but it's mostly through ERI. And so you can see that there's about an equal number of partners among the local governments. And let me add a little context here. The city of Indianapolis has an Office of Sustainability, yet even they are under resources, and they've actually had some of our fellows embedded in them. Small town of Clarksville or Crawfordsville, Indiana, they have one mayor or one half-time county manager. They have no resources to try to understand how to grapple with climate change. And I'm going to explain what we actually do in that space in a little bit. But we've had a number of corporate partner placements, including some at the Indianapolis airport, working on carbon issues, as well as nonprofit partner placements. What these McKinney Climate Fellows do is they spend a week or so with us in the summer getting a boot camp on climate change and climate change toolkits. They go off and do their good work over the summer with either a local government partner or nonprofit or corporate partner, with frequent check-ins for us. And often what they're actually doing when they're in their placement, which is either for the summer or for the entire year, is, for example, develop greenhouse gas inventories and implement them in the town of let's say, Richmond or Clarksville, Indiana, where they don't have one of these. And the reason why this is important is that, as we all know on this webinar, climate change seems to be a polarized subject at the national level, politically partisan subject. At the local level, mayors, whether they're Democrat or Republican, they don't care so much about that. They're dealing with flooded streets, or they want to make intelligent choices about reducing their energy expenditures over the next 5 years. And they don't have the resources to do that. Well, we provide those resources. So we often, for the first year, do a greenhouse gas inventory. That shows them how they can save money effectively, right? Second year, we help them develop a climate action plan. And by then they're hooked. And by the third year, we help them implement that climate action plan. Sometimes they want to do something like, how do we phase in a large-scale photovoltaic system along without electrifying some of our vehicle fleet. That's one of them. We've had several of them who do stormwater issues. But this program has now had 161 graduates from it. And the McKinney Family Foundation was so happy with it that last year they extended it for 5 years. Not last year, this year, sorry. They extended it for 5 years with a $1.25 million grant to continue this going. And this has been, so we are not only providing a service to communities, but we're providing educational assets for the students involved. Right now, they can go out and say, oh yeah, I've been a resilience coordinator. I've worked on climate issues. I can work in a sustainability office, for example. So it's been, and that people-to-people match is really important. So here's some of the tools they employ. Like the Hoosier Resilience Index, which is our downscale model of extreme heat and day and night heat and so forth that we have for the county level in Indiana. And so they use this data along with a number of other data sources to kind of toggle through. It's a toolkit, so you can just toggle through and mark off, show where you are and mark off a number of assumptions, and you get a sense of what's your resilience to future climate change. I mean, you can go totally scientific and think, well, what's my resilience by 2100? But most organizations are looking for what's my resilience in 10 years or 20 years? What should I invest in now that that will hurt me if I don't invest in it? So this is one of the type of tools that they use. Another is called Future Water, where we have the similar kinds of projections, but now this is for water resources at the sub-watershed level, HEC 9 or something like that. I don't know. I'd have to have my HEC person out here, but it's a way that you can actually zoom in on your sub-watershed and with a couple of estimates of what's the future emission scenarios look like. Figure out things like what's my soil moisture, what's my flooding propensity, how does this work with a particular agricultural future that I'm interested in. So it's a downscale model that we'd already done for other things, but now it's applied to water resources. And the other resource that we provide and that we use pretty heavily is the Environmental Resilience Institute Toolkit. And this is because you can sway certain people by data, by our heat projections or water projections, but a lot of people are more swayed by stories, like who is that, especially in Indiana, who has done this before, who's done this project before, what were the hurdles, what were the benefits, and what are the net savings. So this is a case study based toolkit where you can search through your priorities and what you want to search through and get stories. I'm going to say professionally produced, but they are quite professional, these smaller case studies. So they're 2 to 3 page case studies where they're real life examples, not just in Indiana, they're actually all throughout the country. And we're adding on some international examples of projects in these various spaces. So, one of them is city of Evansville. Let me move this thing. Solar technician training program, as well as Northwest Indiana's air quality improvement program. So you can walk through some of these, and again, you can get some, some lessons learned and probably like next steps for a lot of these issues. One of our really exciting programs launched 3 years ago has been the Beat the Heat program. And in this program, the two communities approached us and were keenly aware of some of their issues with how are they going to manage with future heat and future heat stresses. This is the city of Richmond in eastern Indiana and Clarksville in southern Indiana. Both those communities recognize that they not only have a heat problem already, but they also have, they suspected they had a significant environmental disparity problem with that heat, meaning a lot of the hotter places were in lower income communities that were under-resourced in terms of green infrastructure. So this grant, it allowed us to put one full-time staff person for 2 years in both of those communities. And their job wasn't just to take the heat of the community. In fact, they did that, but they used the community members to do that. But their job was really to engage with communities in conversations, which is the first step to understanding how adaptation technologies or adaptive approaches will actually stick or not in a community. As a former Peace Corps volunteer, and the planet is littered with Peace Corps projects that seem like a great idea from up top, but they don't work on the ground because they never actually consulted with communities. Similarly, we are working very hard to make sure that that happens here in Richmond and Clarksville. Jessica? No. Oh, you popped out magically. So sorry. I'll just tell me to stop if I'm sounding.
No, just listening. Sorry, didn't mean to distract you.
And so that's exactly what these Beat the Heat fellows did. They sat in and chatted with communities, but they also did a cool thing modeled off of Portland, Oregon heat temperature map. It's actually, they finished this last year. They actually took the temperature of both of these places. They had 150 volunteers to go out and with high quality temperature sensors, take the temperature morning, noon, and night of one of the hotter days of the summer to get a texture, the thermal texture of the cities. The reason why that's important is, I was mentioning the environmental and disparities and heat disparities. Well, in a sense, does it matter if your city is really hot, where it's mainly just in industrial facilities and nobody lives there? Probably not so much, right? But it does matter a lot if it's hot where communities are, where people are there 24/7, particularly with the challenges of future heat. So these are the kinds of programs we're trying to implement here in the Midwest to get a handle on how to make communities more adaptive to climate change. And I think this is one of my, maybe the third to final example is to do all of that you need to also take the temperature, not just of the cities, but of the populations. So we recognize that Hoosiers, name of people from Indiana, have a pretty bad rap in terms of a number of things. Obviously, we're a ruby red state with blue pockets in most elections, but there's a sense, and this is told to us by a lot of our state representatives, that people don't care about the environment. People don't care about climate in Indiana. They're more quote unquote practical. Well, we put a test to this. We had very extensive surveys, 2 of them, that we put out in communities, and we asked them with a number of questions, what do they actually think? And well, it probably comes as no surprise to you guys. Yeah, people are a little bit wigged out by climate change and about environmental change. And that goes across the political spectrum. There's some disparity in Republicans and Democrats, but there is a broad consensus that people say that it is happening and it's attributable to human activity. And that because it's attributable to human activity, there's some agency to know that, oh, well, we caused it, we can solve it, right? And so these are the kinds of questions that we ask to try to understand how well is our message going to sell in the state of Indiana. It's worked pretty well. We actually, last year, we won the governor's award for environmental education from the governor himself in recognition of these programs. So again, if you can get down to actually helping communities, you can forget about the national partisanship to some extent. So just a couple final things I wanted to bring up is we have some pretty active toolkits around urban green infrastructure. We have something called the Green City Mapper that we'd love to supersize throughout the Midwest. The reason I'm bringing a lot of these Indiana examples is that was our initial remit, but I would love to use this group as well as others to think through how we can expand the successful aspects of what we've done across the Midwest, just because we share many of the same assets and the same kind of community climate trajectories. And so we've developed this Green City Mapper that we're actually using for this NSF civic planning process to in partnership with the city of St. Louis and where's it? Wisconsin. Sorry, Madison, Wisconsin. Yeah, now COVID is the COVID brain's really kicking in. And Kansas City, Kansas, I think, maybe it's Missouri, to figure out how you can use these asset mappers to increase people's awareness of the needs for green infrastructure, as well as increase cities' awareness of the need to maintain green infrastructure. Right, the ease of putting a big concrete tube, like our water infrastructure project underneath the ground, that the wonderful thing about that is once you built it, you supposedly don't have to think about it again. Well, once you plant a tree, if anyone's had a tree die over a dry summer, you know, you've got to keep dealing with the tree, right? You need to maintain these green infrastructure assets. And so that's what we're really focusing on now over the next couple of years. We also want to focus this on this for not just I'm a midget, it's a very tall individual, but we've been happy with what we've been able to do, and fully recognize that some of these things that I've been presenting to you is a in an Indiana focused microcosm of what we can do, and a lot of it is, like I said, probably a little bit out of the remit of the MCAS, but maybe there's aspects of this, maybe there's approaches of this that could be adopted by projects that we actually implemented among the Midwest Climate Adaptation Science Center to make our work more impactful, more community informed, and more sustainable and resilient in the long term. So that's it. That's what I got for you guys. Thank you very much for your